This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Hey, welcome to the Extra Point. I'm Cheryl Ross, the Next Steps and Discipleship Pastor here at Southridge Church, and I am solo today because of different things going on. It's our vacation Bible school week, but we wanted to still offer you some practical next steps for your faith journey, diving deeper into our Sunday sermon. Before I get into that, I want to make sure that if you haven't liked or subscribed to this podcast, that you go ahead and do so. That way you don't miss out on any new content. We are in our Rise and Fall series, part 2, where we are digging into 2 Samuel, continuing with the storyline of David, and we'll get into some other kings later, some other things within his life. And this week, we talked about how after the death of Saul, David had sought God on whether or not he should go back to Judah and where he should go. And we were talking all about how someone greater should be directing our steps, and that when we let God be God and we rely on him to direct those things, then we end up in the perfect place at the perfect time. I don't know about you, but for me, this is often very hard to do because there is a level at which we should have some motivation and some ability to do some things and work while we wait. However, that doesn't mean that we keep God out of the process. It's all about inviting him into that process and allowing him to help direct those things. And this is what David did really well. And one of the things that Pastor Scott shared about was how, God's timing is always going to be better than our timing, and his plan's always going to be better than our plans. And I remember very clearly when this became known to me, one of my favorite verses is Proverbs 16:9, which says that man can make their plans, but God directs their steps. And this is something that I had to hold on to because I knew as a young teenager that I wanted to go into ministry. I felt called into ministry. However, I was at a church that did not affirm female pastors, and we won't really get into that right now, but it made me feel in that moment that I didn't have a way into ministry. So I thought, well, here's what I'll do. I'll go and I'll become a doctor, and I'll do mission work as a doctor, but also not just heal bodies, but heal their souls. That's what I thought. I was like, this is what I'll do. And so I started college and going into pre-med biology, but very quickly I knew that that wasn't the path for me. I knew that that's not really what I really wanted to do or what I felt that I should do. And so it took me a lot of years and a long way around to finally end up in ministry. And I do get to do mission work, but it's in a much better way and in a much more stable environment than what I probably would have had I tried to do things my way. And I remember when I had the opportunity to interview here at Southridge Church at that time as the children's director, I thought, I don't know if this is the way forward or not, but I prayed about it. I remember praying and asking other people who knew me, people who I trusted, to pray with me also. And very clearly, one thing after another, one answer after another came back with a resounding, yes, this is what I'm supposed to do. And here I am 12 years later, now as the associate pastor. And I know that all of this was because we sought God in prayer. And it was kind of the long way around to get here, but I know that I'm in the right place with a level of confidence that I don't believe that I would have had I not sought God on that and followed him and his guidance along the way. And this is the kind of confidence that God gives David and that we can have in our lives when we do invite him in and allow him to direct our steps. We'll know that we're in the right place. We'll know that it's the right time if we really, truly do invite him in. And Pastor Scott dug in really deeply into why this place that God told him to go was the perfect place for him. But I know that there's also very discouraging times along the way that can happen. There was a point in kids ministry where I knew that God was going to be calling me to something different, but I didn't know what, and I didn't know where. I just knew that I wasn't supposed to leave Southridge yet, but I also felt like my time was coming to an end there. And I remember feeling very discouraged for a little while in that moment and in that place where I didn't know what was next, but I knew something was coming. And it was difficult to stay confident in where I was at the moment while I waited for whatever it was that God had next. And I think that in those moments, the main thing that you can really only do is pray and seek God during that time. And that was really the determining factor between, like, the difference between Saul and David, was that David sought God and wanted to be used by God, but didn't want to use God in those moments of discouragement and difficulty. And there's a really big difference in that. And I think in those moments where we become discouraged and we're not really sure if things are working out the way that they should be, we have to take some time, some self-reflection to see and ask ourselves, okay, are we going to God because we're wanting to use him for what we want, or are we going to God so that way we can be used by him for what he wants? And it is not easy. I know firsthand how not easy it can be in those moments. However, it's something that can be developed and strengthened within you the more that you do it. And Pastor Scott also talked about how it doesn't always seem like conventional wisdom. It doesn't always make sense to other people around us to do or make the decisions that we're making based on what we believe God is leading us to or away from. However, God's wisdom is always going to be better than our wisdom. And so within this, you just have to have this level of letting God be God and doing what you know you're supposed to do in the meantime. That was what got me through the discouragement that I felt when I knew something else was coming. That's what got me through the discouragement and feeling of maybe being lost almost in a sense before I took my sabbatical back in 2022. It was just letting go and saying, okay, God, if this is the path that you have for me, that's okay. But I need you to help me be okay with this. And I said, whatever you do, that's fine. But I need you to help me with it. And he did. And I know that through that time on sabbatical, God really showed up and helped me see that I was, in fact, in the right space, the right place, at the right time, and that he had more for me. But in our lives, whether that is in our relationships, in our finances, in our jobs, with our families, there are going to be moments where you're going to face some level of difficulty or decisions, big decisions. And what we have to remember the most in that process when we're trying to decide which way to go, should I take this job? Should I buy this house? Should I marry this person? You have to invite God in. You need to invite him in. You need to spend time in prayer. You need to seek the potential wisdom of other godly people that you know and trust to speak God's wisdom into you and God's truth and word into you, not people who maybe don't know God's truth and God's word. But it takes that level of understanding and knowledge to say, okay, I'm just going to trust God, and no matter if it seems crazy. Maybe it seems crazy to wait to buy a house. Maybe that's what God has for you in this moment, because he knows that maybe the finances aren't going to be there a year from now like they are right now. And so it takes a level of trust, but inviting him into that process and then releasing it to him, no matter the outcome, no matter what you feel he says, don't go ahead and just do what you want anyway. Trust that he knows best, that his way is better. And remember that maybe it takes a long way around to get there. Maybe it's a short way. But what matters most is that it's God's way. There will be times where he'll open doors quickly and you'll get there quicker. And there will be times where it takes longer. But as long as it's God's way, that is what is so incredibly important. So I hope that some of my stories have helped you a little bit, and that just this refresher and understanding about how we can let God be God has helped you with your faith journey. As always, if you have questions for us, please send those in, because we would love to answer them and help you dig a little deeper into the teachings and the things that we have coming up in 2 Samuel as you're reading ahead. If you want to do that, send us those questions and we will help you with your faith journey. But come back here again next week and we'll have more practical next steps for your faith journey.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.